World War II unleashed chaos across land, sea, and sky, but few battles were as intense as the aerial dogfights in the Pacific Theatre. High above the ocean, the sky became a crucible of fire and steel, where control of the air meant survival. Among these fierce clashes was the unforgettable encounter between the Grim Reapers, a fearless squadron of F-4F Wildcats, and Japan's Kamikaze bombers, human missiles on deadly missions. Today in Legends of Aviation, we explore this electrifying showdown, fury in the skies, when Grim Reapers and Kamikazes collided. Chapter 1. Setting the stage. As dawn broke over the Pacific, the USS Enterprise cut through the ocean, its flight deck alive with activity. The Enterprise, one of the largest aircraft carriers in the American fleet, was the backbone of a massive battle group consisting of 21 ships. Below deck, engines hummed with anticipation, while above, sailors worked tirelessly, prepping the fighter planes for launch. The Enterprise was no stranger to battle. It had survived numerous engagements with the Japanese Navy and earned its place as one of the most feared and respected ships in the Pacific. But this morning was different. The alarm sounded aboard the ship, a shrill cry warning of an imminent threat. The Japanese bombers, including both conventional and kamikaze aircraft, were closing in. Time was running out. In the chaos, a commanding voice rose above the noise, Lieutenant Stanley Vadersa. His mission was clear: to get the Grim Reapers, his 8-plane squadron of F-4F Wildcats, into the air and defend the fleet. As the engines of the Wildcats roared to life, the pilots rushed into formation. Vadersa's mind raced, not with fear, but with cold, calculating focus. They had to protect the USS Enterprise at all costs. He glanced at the ships below, 2 aircraft carriers, thousands of lives, and the hopes of a nation resting on the success of his squadron. They were already late to the party, and the Japanese were closing in fast. Chapter 2. Kamikaze. But who exactly were these kamikaze pilots? These were not ordinary enemy fighters. The kamikaze were part of Japan's special attack units, a group of military aviators whose mission was both terrifying and tragic. These pilots volunteered, knowing they would never return home. Their planes, often loaded with bombs and explosives, were human-guided missiles, designed to crash directly into Allied ships. The goal was simple: cause maximum destruction, even at the cost of their own lives. Ships, even the largest and most heavily armoured ones, could be crippled by a single well-aimed kamikaze strike. The grim reality for Allied sailors was that no matter how many kamikazes they shot down, one pilot slipping through the defences could mean disaster. Chapter 3. The Grim Reality. As Vadersa and his squadron climbed to intercept, the first wave of Japanese bombers appeared in the distance. These weren't just kamikazes. Some were Aichi D-3A Vals, dive bombers capable of delivering devastating payloads to the American fleet. Vadersa's heart raced as he realized they were at a disadvantage. They were too low, and the enemy bombers were already in position. As the Wildcats frantically climbed, the Vals dove toward the USS Hornet, another carrier in the battle group. The skies erupted with anti-aircraft fire. Tracers filled the air, arching toward the incoming Vals. But it wasn't enough. Bombs exploded across the flight deck of the Hornet, sending plumes of smoke and fire into the sky. Vadersa and his men were horrified. They were too late to prevent the damage, but they weren't done yet. With fury in his heart, Vadersa gave the order: engage the bombers. He lined up behind a retreating Val, pulled the trigger, and unleashed a hail of bullets. His 6 wing-mounted machine guns roared to life, shredding the enemy plane in an instant. But as he celebrated the kill, another wave of bombers appeared on the horizon. Chapter 4. Desperate counterattacks. This time, their target was the USS Enterprise. The carrier's anti-aircraft guns lit up the sky with flak, but the kamikazes pressed forward, determined to fulfill their deadly mission. With no time to lose, Vadersa and his wingman, Lieutenant Leroy Tex Harris, dove into the fray. The Wildcats roared as they barreled toward the enemy. "I've got one, Vadersa!" Tech shouted over the radio, his guns shredding a Kate torpedo bomber before it could strike. One kamikaze engulfed in flames after being hit, veered off course. But instead of crashing into the sea, it adjusted its flight path and aimed directly at the USS Hornet. The crew on deck watched in horror as the plane grew closer. Despite being badly damaged, the kamikaze pilot continued his final tragic mission, slamming his aircraft into the ship's island, setting off a massive explosion. The impact sent sailors flying, and fires raged across the deck. Chapter 5: Turning the Tide. Despite the carnage, Vader and his squadron knew they had to keep fighting. The USS Enterprise was still under threat, and the Japanese bombers were relentless. As the Wildcats gained altitude, they spotted another group of enemy planes in the distance. The air was thick with tension, the lives of the sailors aboard the Enterprise hanging in the balance. Vader led the charge, diving straight into the formation of bombers. His guns roared as he tore through the enemy, his bullets finding their marks with deadly precision. One by one, the Japanese planes fell from the sky, plummeting into the ocean below. The Grim Reapers had managed to turn the tide, but the battle was far from over. Chapter 6: The Final Assault. Just as Vader thought the skies were clear, a lone Kate bomber appeared on the horizon. It was heading straight for the USS Enterprise, and Vader had no ammunition left. He was out of options. Desperation gnawed at him. What could he do? Then, a thought struck him. Something no pilot would ever consider unless all hope was lost. With no time to think, Vader lined up his Wildcat behind the Kate, prepared to slice through its tail with his propeller. But before he could make contact, the Kate suddenly flipped upside down and dove toward another ship, the USS Smith. In an instant, the enemy plane crashed into the ship, exploding in a fiery ball of destruction. Vader pulled away, heart pounding. The USS Enterprise was safe, but the cost of the battle was etched across the Pacific. By the end of that brutal day, Lieutenant Stanley Vader became an ace, downing 5 enemy planes in one battle. His courage, and that of the Grim Reapers, saved the USS Enterprise and countless lives. Though the skies cleared, their bravery remained a lasting testament to the relentless fight for survival in the air.